Hi. Welcome to our podcast, the Podcastathon. We are so excited to be here. I am Kelly McKinnon-Bermingham, and you are joining us live on our podcast, which is called, is my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, which is called A 25-Year Look Across the Spectrum with Kelly Bermingham and Jenn Lucero. And so I am Kelly. I am a board-certified behavior analyst. I have been a board-certified behavior analyst since 2003, so I'm on my 20th year as a BCBA. And I've been working in the field of working with adults and children with developmental disabilities and autism for, it said 25 years in the podcast, but now I'm hitting my 28th year, so I've been doing this a long time. And with me today is my bestie, my partner in crime, Jenn Lucero, mom to Dylan and Ethan. Hi, Jenn.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey. So first of all, the fact, this is way past my bedtime too, Connor, who we just watched, and the fact that we got to follow Spencer and Lucas singing and performing, and then Connor's cooking with friends was pretty impressive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me tell you, folks that have never heard our podcast before, a little bit about our podcast and who we are and why we do what we do. So Jenn and I are longtime friends, and we'll talk to you a little bit about our history. Jenn has a son on the spectrum, Dylan, and she'll talk to you about him. I have known him since he was 4 years old. He's now 23, right? And we have been friends. We worked together when he was first diagnosed. I was the BCBA working with him. Then we found ourselves working alongside each other. And so I stopped treating Dylan and we became colleagues and now like bestie friends. And we
family,
right? We started this podcast, honestly, it started in the pandemic because we weren't seeing each other. And so we would be Zooming or talking, and we thought we'd be talking about Dylan and just different things. And we thought, well, shoot, let's just record this and see what we can do with it. And for myself personally, as a BCBA, I have a special interest and compassion about helping caregivers, parents that are raising children with autism to collaborate alongside the BCBA that might be working with them if they have an ABA program. And that relationship doesn't always go great. I know, Jenn, you've had some really great experiences, but that's because you're so great and you make sure you have great experiences. But those relationships can get really muddied and tricky. And I'm actually experiencing one right now. And so what we have always done is sort of sit down from our two perspectives, like one, me as a BCBA talking about the ABA program, the goals and the strategies, which Shannon and her, ABA and her jargon of the week, I've followed forever since she started it. And I know you have too, Jenn. Mm-hmm. And then you sit down as a caregiver and we talk through different issues. So that's the crux of our podcast. And I'll just throw out there a little bit. If there happens to be a BCBA on here listening, you can get CEUs for listening to our podcast for free through SitePro, who sponsors us. And you can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And so what we're really trying to do is help families and BCBAs come together in those experiences. So I will start off by saying, as a BCBA, doing this a long time, I also have a stepdaughter on the autism spectrum. And I didn't realize some things about the caregiver's perspective until I until I was in those shoes of having to raise someone on the spectrum. And so I'll talk more about that. But that's what our podcast has always been about. And we tackle different topics. And so, Jenn, that's my story. Tell everyone a little bit about your story.
Sure. So my son Dylan is 23 years old. He is severely impacted with autism. He has great strengths. He definitely, has some areas that he needs help with and probably will for, the remainder of his life. My main goal is always to make sure that he is happy, safe, and well taken care of. I also have another son, Ethan, who just turned 21. He's about to graduate from college next month, which just seems super wild to me. He is only 23 months younger than Dylan. And so he has only known, autism being part of his life, but he takes it with stride. He's always been kind of a mini advocate, and knows everything, I would say sometimes even more than me about autism. He'll tell you how it is. But he loves his brother. He's been really great about the whole thing. We've had a lot of challenges. A single mom for quite a period of time. I worked full time. I definitely had a huge, change of career path. Once my son was diagnosed, I was a designer for Disney. And then, I went full in on when Dylan was diagnosed at 4, learning everything I could about it. Did every service, every treatment, anything I could do to support Dylan. And with that, it changed my career. I ended up working for special ed department in the school district for several years with behavior. And then I have been working with nonprofit organizations for about the last 15 years now. And I found my niche was in fundraising. So I worked for Autism Speaks for multiple years. And now I'm the director for Special Olympics in Southern California, do all their fundraising. So, I learned a lot. I knew nothing about autism until it was kind of thrown in my life. But also I've met incredible people that have changed my life and become, incredible friends and warriors. And I feel like we're a tribe. And, Dylan has brought a lot of amazing, positive things into my life.
And mine. And so, we'll back up a little bit. 20 years ago, let's say, when Dylan first started to show signs, right? That was 20 years ago. I've been a BCBA 20 years. There weren't a lot of services back then. Now, if you go back, and Shannon's an OG. She was around then too.
Love Shannon.
And there's, I moved from Boston to California in 2001, and then started doing some opening a private practice and consulting, and then finished up my BCBA. And back then, insurance did not cover ABA services, right? School districts were trying to do some ABA kind of work, some decently, some very poorly. Mm-hmm. Regional centers were funding ABA, but they had caps on hours, right? Maybe you got 15 hours a week if you had a really good, service coordinator who was being kind. But for a long time, particularly in Orange County, they were capping at 10.
Yes.
10 hours a week, right? Mm-hmm. And so, the kind of intensive services that were needed. And frankly, back then, there were only a few of us BCBAs. I think I know all the BCBAs that were in California total. Mm-hmm. We're all friends and know each other because people didn't know what it was. Shannon's always championed ABA services. And, so there's no insurance coverage. Access was incredibly hard. I know for a fact because, Jen, I worked with you. You guys paid out of pocket for services. Yeah. You paid me out of pocket for services. Mm-hmm. Right? And so parents and caregivers have had to fight tooth and nail to get these kinds of ABA services for their kids. Mm-hmm. And all of these families, we all know each other. And the original BCBAs, all lobbying and fighting. And it did not pass. Insurance law did not pass in California until 2013. That's when families started to get served. How old was Dylan in 2013? A teenager.
He would have been 12.
Yeah, 12. Okay. Yeah. So all that time, parents are trying to figure out what it was, right? And so it's a really young field still in general. And so 2013, insurance, I remember when the insurance laws first came out, they had dollar caps. Mm-hmm. You could get ABA service, but you could only get a little bit. And then once your dollars were up, you were done. Mm-hmm. And then they started changing it. and allowing families to get more access. So it's been like this battle for ABA services for a really long time. And having done the battle just to get family services and then to be able to provide services, I started to really spend time looking at like the caregiver role, right? Mm-hmm. Parents were not even only fighting for services for their kids, but the day-to-day in and out fighting for like, is your child eating? Is your child sleeping? Mm-hmm. Right? Is, all the medical conditions that go along with that. Is your child getting is your child educated properly? The financial stress, the marital stress, right?
Yep.
So that is something that you and I have, championed together, is this like caregiver collaboration. So we really started talking about caregiver collaboration. Now, why am I calling it caregiver? Here's why. Because insurance companies want us to call it parent training, right? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that term, parent training, Jen?
Well, I mean, it's caregiver because it's about the whole family. It's the whole tribe, right? Takes a village. I mean, it could be the parents. I mean, certainly in my case, the grandparents, the siblings, right. The neighbors.
Yeah, so I am super adverse to the term parent training. That mm-hmm. term came about from insurance funders. Mm-hmm. They named it parent training. And they said, as BCBAs, we have to train parents. Mm-hmm. Right? I've always been someone who's bucked the system. I'm bucking it right now. I'm fighting a certain group of people who want to call it parent training still and be very specific about that. And I'll explain that in a second. But in my mind, it has always been a caregiver experience, right? Because of the whole family that's involved. There are, multiple family members living together, grandparents all living together, or like your parents are so involved in Dylan's life. And so you will hear in our podcast, Jennifer and I talking a lot about caregiver and not training. Like that's insulting.
It is insulting. I mean, when you say parent training, it's like, you're training us. We're collaborating. We're here to support our children, our adults, as much as possible to have the most successful outcome. So, the term is, it is insulting.
It's insulting, right? I'm on a Facebook page, Autism Law Summit Facebook page. I love that page because I go to that group and ask questions and all the parents will say, that's insulting. Don't mm-hmm. say that. But what I can say is, as a BCBA, trained in ABA, I have strategies, right? Mm-hmm. I have strategies. I have training. I've read research about strategies that might or might not work. But here's the thing that I feel like ABA companies and people miss the boat. And I was just talking about that when you and I presented at Cal ABA, alongside Michelle Hyde and Judith Ursity about this very topic, is someone came up to me and said, I'm struggling with a parent on parent training. And I said, tell me why. And they told me the goals. And I said, are those the parents' goals? And he said, I don't know. And I feel like the number one thing for this whole point of collaboration, which you and I talk about extensively, is one, the goals that we write in a treatment plan have to be the goals that are meaningful for the family. They have to be goals that improve your quality of life and are meaningful.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's where the term collaboration comes into play.
I do feel, though, that, of course, having the insurance covered is a huge milestone and has done great things for families and individuals. It also set a certain standard where it felt like the insurance companies were actually setting the goals
yep.
For both the providers and the families rather than listening to what the families, issues, conflicts, goals for their child and it's like a very strange thing where I felt like we were, as a parent, you're being tested and also given certain, here you go now and do this. Whereas you're on the spot, you're being the one tested when you're the one seeking help, right?
Right. And so I know you and I identified a long time ago, quality of life. And there were 5 things, right? And tell me if I'm wrong, but as a parent, I'm putting myself in the parent shoes. And I'll pause for a second because I'm a good BCBA, right? I've been doing this a really long time. And then I laugh because you don't have to raise a child on the autism spectrum to be a good ABA provider. However, what I learned when I became a step parent on the child of the spectrum, and you heard me say this so many times, are a few things. One, I didn't understand the level of stress and guilt, which we'll talk about, right? A lot of the stress comes from, is my child happy? Right? Second, healthy. The comorbid medical conditions are unbelievable, right? Like I know we can talk about Dylan's, extensive medical needs. My own stepdaughter, who is, moderate to high functioning, does live fairly independently, has a job, still cannot tell us. Like she works at Chick-fil-A. She can follow directions and converse with people, still can't tell us what's wrong when she doesn't feel well. Like we have had every test under the sun trying to figure out her stomach and gut issues. She has phantom arm pain, you name it. We have spent so much time and money trying to figure out these health issues. So, is she happy? Is she healthy? Right? Is she safe? God, that is so scary. Some of the things we've had to work through with her. Does she have a community of people, right? And does she have a tribe of people that are there for her when we're not there, right? So this is why I feel like the goals have to be meaningful for the family. So on top of those 5 things, the research around raising a child, and Jenn, I'm going to put you on the spot with these things. Number one, that research indicates that raising a child on the spectrum, parents raising a child on the spectrum are 40% plus more stressed than parents raising a neurotypical child. Talk to us about the stress.
Absolutely, definitely.
It's all the medical and health stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Financial. That was my last one. Financial.
Yeah. I would say many factors for me. Like I said, I work full time, but I also, because now he's an adult and services are very limited right now, especially
jumped off the cliff.
Especially post, pandemic. It took me almost a year to get him into adult day program. Even though he's finally in, it's still 4 hours a day, which they, even 6 hours a day is considered a day program, but that's not really many hours when it comes to 24 hours a day. So I juggle everything of, trying to work full time, going to pick him up, trying to get him to either respite care or, relatives or friends, and going back to work. I have a pretty high pressure job.
Yeah, you do.
At the same time, Dylan has a lot of medical issues, and which, have escalated in the last year besides severe autism. About a year ago, he got extremely sick, was in the hospital. We did several tests, and he ended up being diagnosed with Crohn's disease on top of everything else. And he's in treatment for that. So I just had a huge event this past Saturday that you were at, which is, I've been working 7 days a week, almost 24/7. But in the same week, just a couple of days before the event, I went and took him for a 4-hour IUD infusion at the hospital. And so, we made it through. But, I was exhausted. I felt guilty about being exhausted because, he was sitting there doing all the work. I'm just trying to be there and, support him. And so there's a huge guilt factor, whether or not, do I know what's going on with him medically? Am I, doing the right thing? Am I supporting him enough? Am I working too much? Things like that. Am I spending enough time with him? And then, financially, obviously, it's a huge hit with autism. there's not enough services out there. Like, if you really want to do things, I've seen this from day one too. Like, when even if it's available, I mean, we've done literally probably, dozens and dozens of services throughout the years, but you get what you pay for.
Yep.
And like, you decide at that point in time, like, what's the goal? What's the most important thing to seek out at that time? Whether it's speech therapy, OT, hippotherapy, the gym, social skills, and it changes. And every year you have to like balance it and see like where's he at and what's going to be the best thing for him right now. And it's interestingly right now, what has been the best thing for him is going to like Broadway production musical theaters. So, that's where I'm like spending my time and energy right now. And like his behavior is amazing. He loves it. And he's like doing so great. So I think it's always a balance and, just seeing what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, I think I would say for me, safety always, because he has to, no matter what, he still needs 24-hour supervision.
Mm-hmm.
Never leave him alone. Like, I've always worried about what's going to happen. Even when he is someplace, like he's in a great adult day program with Easter sales, but I still worry. I mean, I know he's in a great facility, but it's on a busy street, and he's only a couple blocks away from my work at Special Olympics, but I still like have like things in the back of my mind of like, what if he walks out and something happens to him? But I love him so much, and he's such a great guy. And I think for any parent, like our biggest fear too is always what's going to happen if something happens to me or when I'm gone. So that's a whole nother topic.
Well, that goes to like our quality of life indicators, right? I mean, like the stress is real.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as a younger, newer BCBA, I didn't appreciate that at all. Like a lot of it is time and experience and spending time and actually listening to the families I'm working with. And, I'll share that there are a lot of criticism against ABA. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people say, well, it was bad ABA, now it's good ABA. I will disagree with that because I feel like I've always done really thoughtful, kind, good ABA. But what is missing in the coursework for BCBAs is like family systems and family dynamics. Like that's not usually in the coursework. And I think that the place where new BCBAs can get that is in their supervision hours and their like practicums or supervisor experiences. But our field is so young. Do you know that over 50% of BCBAs have only been certified for a few years? Right? I'm the 1,368th BCBA in the world, right? So good for me. But there's like almost 60,000 now, but they've only been certified for a few years.
Yeah.
So those folks are supervising the BCBAs coming out now. So the depth of the people supervising BCBAs is not good. And they don't have a lot of experience. And they don't have teaching on family systems, which is why you and I go around so much talking about like this caregiver collaboration, because one, the stress, right? The stress, the guilt, right? And I know something that I didn't realize until I lived it with my husband is the guilt that family caregivers feel when they take time for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have that guilt, but like,
of course,
when Bill and I take a date night on Saturday night, there's a certain level of guilt there where we're like, we're taking time for ourselves, and how dare we?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, that's true.
And then the other thing is, not everything is a teaching moment, right? That is something that I think I shared this when we did this talk at Cal ABA on the panel, that my husband taught me was that as a BCBA, when I started joining forces with him and his daughter, I'm like, I'm I'm the shit. I'm great. I'm going to like come in here and solve everyone's problems. And I'm going to teach everything there is all at once really fast. And that was awful. And everything to me was a teaching moment, right? Like every single thing. And finally my husband was like, this isn't going to work if you don't like back off and give us all a break for a minute. And as a BCBA, I couldn't understand that. I'm like, no, wait, we're missing precious opportunity. But when I really put myself in the shoes of everyone, it was like, oh, we can like give into this one today because we're all too tired.
Mm-hmm. Right? No, for sure. I mean, I have people, because Dylan has communication issues. And we call it the Dylan language.
Yes.
And so, like, I've been with him for 23 years. I can usually figure out what he's saying. He's very determined. He'll keep going and say it over and over. He'll try to spell it out until you get it. But I have people call me all the time, especially with, some behavior stuff. And they'll be like, why did this happen? And I'd be I wasn't there. I have no idea. Like, and at some point, especially when I'm trying to work, I which probably sounds terrible, but same thing like Bill, like, it's like, whatever, like, we have to, like, we can't dwell on everything and like try to figure out why everything is happening and the teaching moment. Like, sometimes you just have to get through it. Mm-hmm. Understand, like, I mean, he's human. I think we all have moments. I know I've had a lot of moments lately, and like, we just got to move on and get past it and not try to like dwell and obsess on like why certain things are happening.
Yeah. And one thing that Bill and I set up for everyone's sanity was, in ABA terms, we called it non-contingent Sunday. I had to like frame it that way in my mind, but basically it was like free day Sunday, which meant that, we had Melanie on lots of plans, like, if you do these things on Friday, we'll take you here. If you do this Saturday, we'll take you here, if, you do a good job, we'll take you to Target, kind of thing. Yeah. Like most families do. They're great strategies, right? They're like reinforcement strategies for good behavior. One thing that we ended up doing that to this day, we're 15 years into this, to this day we still do, is like free Sunday, regardless of what happened during the week, no matter what. On Sunday, we're going to hang out and spend time together, right? Even if like something wasn't earned, like Sunday's never a day. And we're going to pick an activity, and hopefully it's something that we all like and get along and do well together. Sometimes it backfires in our face. We do a lot of community theater too. That's
yes, I know.
Melanie enjoys. But it just made it, I didn't realize how important it was as a parent to just be with your child, right? Like, to me, everything was earned and a reward as a BCBA. And then when we set this up, Sundays was like, no matter how the week went, we're going to just, Sunday's a whole day of its own, clean slate, just enjoy ourselves, enjoy each other. That was a game changer for us.
No, it's awesome. So one thing Dylan started, with Dylan, sometimes when she do something once, like, that's it. And then it's like he remembers, and it's like to the day and like that time frame. So the one thing recently that he's done, which I love it too, so I'm not going to fight it, is he wants, it's usually like a Thursday late afternoon, right when I'm getting off work or something, he asked me to drive him to the beach. So I love the beach. He loves the beach. We both love the ocean. And he usually chooses Laguna Beach, and we drive down there. Sometimes we get out of the car, sometimes we go down to the water, and sometimes he just wants to drive, on PCH. And sometimes we go to, the sea lion rescue, and it's like a thing for him. And there's times, honestly, when he says it in my head, I'm like, had a really long week already, tired, and part of me is like, oh, really? But I mean, I think for both of us, it's like you said, it's like one of those moments, no matter what's happened already this week, like anything goes. And, I think it's good. I actually think it's good for everybody involved, because you don't have to take everything so seriously. Like you can just have the time period or a day where you're just trying to relax and chill.
Yeah. And, as maybe BCBAs are wired this way, or maybe it's just me, but like everything has like a purpose, and there's a goal, and there's a plan, and there's strategy, and there's a consequence to it. Consequent meaning like something good, like a reward and everything. But to just be as a family on Sunday, regardless of something happened on Saturday, that was hard for me at first, right? Because I was very much like, no, Saturday this happened and that was bad. And so we're not going to reward that, and we're not going to earn that. But when I was able to let that go, and just Sunday we were a family no matter what, that actually really strengthened our family and strengthened my relationship with my stepdaughter and my relationship with my husband, where it was just like autism, whatever, right? Like we don't care about autism today. We don't care about your skills and what you've earned or your behavior. We're just going to pick something and enjoy the moment. And I've told so many families that, because like I said, that was a game changer to just like be in the moment. And then on Monday we'd go back to like, okay, now we're back on track, and we'd like set our rules and follow things like that.
No, for sure. And I mean, he's gotten better about it. Dylan is extremely about structure, calendar, routine. I mean, we've had to work on all these strategies of just changing it up, being flexible. And I mean, when I think about it before, he would have to have a calendar and lists and repeat it 1,000 times a day. And I mean, now it's I can change things up, he might for a minute give me a look, and maybe not be very happy about it, but to think about how far we come, since he was younger. And I think that's a good thing, just to think for younger families. I had mentors. I have a friend, Hope, who I met her son was 11, Aries, and Dylan had just been diagnosed, and he was, 4 years old. And I used her as a sounding board, and looking at Aries and how he has evolved and, matured and done so well. And at the time when Dylan was younger, I was always thinking it's never going to get any better. It's so rough. But it has. And now, I'm hoping anyways, I have friends with younger kids, and I try to be that same sounding board. But I think that's so important. Like you said, it's all about the whole family, not about just, the one child that has autism. I mean, you have to be flexible for the other child, and, both spend time with the other child separately, but also as a family, but incorporate, things for everybody, and not just be pigeonholed to the structure and the intense needs of one child, but just everybody as a whole, and for everybody's sanity.
Yeah. So exactly. So going back to some of the research, so, concerned stress, right? High levels of stress for caregivers. If there are any families listening to this, then I'm sure they're like, yep. And if there's BCBAs listening, understanding that, other one is greater concerns for quality of life, like we've talked about, health, safety, for families raising children on the autism spectrum over raising neurotypical children. And then the other one, and in that is financial stress too, with that. And then the other one is marital stress, right? And I'm not going to quote statistics because I've seen different studies report on this differently. I can only talk about anecdotally. I've seen a lot of families stay together, but I also see a lot of rates of divorce. my own situation. I know Bill and Melanie's mom divorced very early on when she was 7. A lot to do with, and the reasons people divorce, one are don't want to deal with the autism. Another one is in denial over autism. And then the other big one is differences in how to raise a child on the spectrum. I don't mean to get too personal with you. But and so it's as a BCBA working with families, trying to navigate that. That's something that I work with a lot. And I know you have friends, not to, put you on the spot too much, but, navigating how to raise that child. That's where BCBA can be very helpful, right? But sometimes it can be really challenging because people think differently. And I can tell you, there's also a little bit of a generational thing. A lot of times when I'm working with families, the grandparents blame the parents for not disciplining their children. Your parents don't do that. But a lot of grandparents will blame the parents and say you're not disciplining properly or enough. And there's also something called locus of control that I go down the rabbit hole with this. Is that men and women think differently about who's responsible for their child's problem behavior, right? Whereas men tend to blame external factors. They blame the mothers, they blame other people, they blame the schools. Women tend to blame themselves.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny because, I've had, and I won't say who, but
you and I are restraining ourselves when we do a podcast. Wearing and dropping names.
Yeah, and because you've been around so long. When Dylan was younger, even things are getting better, knock on wood. But he was definitely an extreme place of aggression, tantrums. A lot of it, I think, due to medical issues, but. There's a time period where people did, think that it was my parenting style or it's too laxed or, too chill and I wasn't, disciplining enough or whatnot. But it was interesting. My kids are only 23 months apart and Ethan was younger and he milestone wise and just every factor, if you want to look at, development was off the charts, and talking and just everything he was doing socially, just school, everything, just, So when I'm being bashed and told Dylan is having meltdowns and tantrums because, I'm a wimp and I'm just, not, discipline enough or whatnot, and you were a good advocate for me at the time because you're well, look at you, and it's so it's so hard because it's so stressful as it is, and honestly I don't know what the hell is going on. I was just trying to make it. There's times when I'm I am literally just trying to make it through the day, without the house getting trashed, without getting punched, whatever,
Yep.
Someone, any of us sleeping through the night, being able to work, whatever. So to have that stigma and have that extra pressure, and I had my own guilt because of course I questioned everything I did myself, but when you have other outside factors and people also putting that on you, it's pretty damaging. It's pretty sad. And if anything, that's why I've tried to be a huge advocate for other people and families and friends and parents and siblings and grandparents and just the whole family dynamic, because, we're in the end, we're just here to try to, we've said, provide the best life we can for our kiddos, especially the ones that are severely impacted.
Yep.
I want the best for Dylan. I don't want to change him. I just want him to, be the best person he can be, just like my other son. I mean, I look at it the same way. I don't look at it any way differently. It's like different, it's a different approach, but it's still the same, like, goals and outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to healthy, happy, safe, right? Mm-hmm. And having a community and, and for the family members, for a tribe. Mm-hmm. And so when I read that study about how men tend to blame external factors and women blame themselves, I was like, that's dead on. And then, as we're starting to close, I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. I've worked in this field a long time. I work for several companies. I'm in the severe autism space right now, but I also still do consulting for like social skill groups and early intervention, because that is a passion of mine too. I had my private practice for years running social skill groups. I wrote a book on social skills teaching. I have a new early intervention book coming out, hopefully summer, if not fall. And I was looking at some of the goals that are being written by ABA companies. And, when I worked at UCI in the autism department, I saw every ABA company in Orange County's reports and goals. Mm-hmm. And family I'm consulting with now, I just got their ABA report. And I keep looking at these goals and saying, what the hell? They're so meaningless. Like, they're so abstract and different, and they bounce all over the place. And I keep going. I can't say it enough to anyone who's listening. Families, if you're listening, advocate with your ABA companies. Like, the very first thing that should happen is the family's needs right now should be part of the goals.
Absolutely.
Right. And like, the thing is these kids aren't sleeping, right? Kids on the spectrum sleep up to 60% less than a neurotypical child, and up to an hour and a half less a night.
Hour and a half?
No, that's an average. Right? I was talking to mom the other day, and her son will stay up for 48 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. You've done that.
Yes.
Right. So like, why isn't sleep a goal? And then, are they eating okay? Like, I can't tell you how many kids that I'm working with, and it's a junk food diet because that's all they will eat and they've ever eaten. And so because of that, then they have stomach issues and bowel issues. Mm-hmm. Right. And if your kid can't toilet, and you can't, like, if you're a parent and your child isn't sleeping or eating and going to the bathroom, that's stress right there.
Absolutely.
And so, like, the goal, and it takes me right back to, like, okay, the parents are more stressed than other parents raising a child with autism. And I go back to my quality of life topics, right? Like, are they healthy, happy, and safe? And so, like, those need to be the freaking goals.
Yeah.
And then right, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I read this article once, which totally bummed me out. And this is a long time ago. And it was, I wish I wouldn't have read it, because I was like, well, this sucks. It was about special needs or a caregiver of people in general. It could be cancer, it could be special needs, it could be anything. But it said that if you're a caregiver of someone that has, special or medical needs, that your lifespan so it was 9 to 16 years less than the average lifespan. I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, sometimes when you read these things, you're like, well, you almost wish you didn't. But, I mean, not that that's that you're doomed or anything, but you have to think about that. And that's why also, which is easier said than done, trying to have like some sort of self-care is so important for not just obviously you, but your family, and especially the person that you are the full-time caregiver for. Because if I go down, everybody's going to go down.
That's such a good point. I always forget that part, right? The self-care. You're right. Because if you're not well, you can't take care of everyone else. And you're right. Everyone's going down, Jen. If you're not around, say my household.
Yeah.
And then Jennifer O.C. says, heal the gut, heal the brain, they will sleep. Absolutely. And so that's going to bring me to the last point about all this, like, healthiness is our kids are not moving enough, right? They move less, move significantly less. This freaking pandemic, man, just destroys so many of the kids' lives that I see. I'm seeing so many of our kids that have spent 2 years sitting at home on their iPads because that's all anyone can do to survive. And now trying to get them back out and active is so hard. But we know that like exercise, first of all, if you're constipated and you have gut issues, right? If you're constipated, exercising helps improve bowel movement, right?
Yes.
But it also helps you sleep, right? Swimming is one of the best activities our kids can engage in because of the full body movements, right?
Absolutely. Dylan would be submerged in water like all day long if I would let him.
Yep.
That's the one thing I do feel water in any capacity is like extremely healing and has helped him a lot.
Yeah. And I think that, part of what's so magic about this is, you raise money and you're a part of Special Olympics of Southern California, and Special Olympics is exactly what all of our kids should be doing.
Yeah.
Because not only are they moving their body, but there's all the health and wellness appointments and aspects of Special Olympics. And then it's the tribe.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You got to surround yourself with people that understand, will accept you and get it. Because it doesn't matter whether it's, a spouse, a relative, a friend. I mean, I learned quickly when Dylan was diagnosed that some people just they can't do it. They can't accept it. And that's fine. But you can also find and surround yourself with people that do get it and that want to help you, but also you want to help them. And it could be completely different situations, but we're all there for each other. I mean, that's why I work at the surf group. And that's what I loved from day one, because, we could all be out by
let's plug them, surfers healing.
Surfers healing.
We all love them.
Yes. And it's funny because, we go out in the water and like everybody's on the beach, and if your kid comes and dumps a bucket of sand on somebody's head, like no one's gonna flinch, or someone's stemming or making loud noises or whatever. It's we're just all there together and there to support each other. So I think that is a huge component, just to everybody's wellness and sanity.
Absolutely. And so, as we're closing, that brings us to like why we do this podcast. And so Jenn and I like to take topics related to autism and ABA and talk it through from a BCBA perspective and a caregiver perspective. Some of our more funnier topics, actually a couple of our top listened podcasts. And again, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can look me up on LinkedIn or Instagram and Facebook, or Jenn, find Kelly Bermingham. You can find us. I'm not huge social media savvy. I'm old and I'm like, but we have one topic that we covered and covered 4 different angles was masturbation, right? Masturbation and sexuality for our kids, because, obviously there are higher rates of autism in males than females. And it's a lot of moms and female BCBAs trying to figure out how to help young men on the spectrum masturbate. So
it still makes me cringe when I think about it.
Right. And then like our good friend Barbie, whose son was grabbing, she's so funny. He was grabbing the metal mixing bowl and taking it in his room.
He's rocking it.
Because he liked the pressure of it. And so then we affectionately called the mixing bowl his girlfriend. But we do take topics and talk about it because somebody has to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's reality.
Those were some of our top rated podcasts, is when we talk about sexuality and masturbation. And I teach a course on SitePro, and I get contacted from people all over the world because it ends up frankly being that just no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I still don't want to talk about it, but I do have 2 boys, and I had to raise them like myself during that whole stage. So I survived.
I somehow get contact. Like I'm working with a group in England with some of their students at their school. And I'm like, I'm no expert at all. I have to always go to Bill and say, like, does the male part do this or do that?
Yeah.
But, like, it's female, a lot of women BCBAs and moms and women teachers trying to sort it out. So we've got to talk about it. And then the other thing that we do talk a lot about is siblings, the impact of autism on siblings. And if you haven't checked us out, you should check us out on the sibling part, because Jen's son, Ethan, twice has been on the podcast. And that's one of our highest rated podcasts because he's so honest and truthful about how he feels about having a brother on the spectrum.
Yeah, he's awesome. Don't tell him that, though. He's going to get a big ego if he knows he's like the top rated.
It is like going the top rated, and it's both of them. We had him on twice, and he's so real about, one, his love for Dylan, and two, his concerns. And then, frankly, he can spot a good ABA person a mile away and a bad ABA person a mile away.
He does. And, I've taken them with me to certain situations just to check things out, and he's really good. We've looked at, not that we're going there anytime soon, but he went with me to look at group homes, and, he went with me. He's asked me about, even though he was young at the time, conservatorship and what's going to happen to Dylan and like all these different aspects. And like, he had some good questions that I didn't even think about. And he had like a whole list, as a checklist every time of asking, and one big thing is I've always been with him, like, you're not going to have to take care of Dylan. Like, don't worry. I never wanted him to feel responsible, like that have to take him on, and he's going to live with you, anything like that. But if you want to like be part of it and help with the decision making, like, that's awesome and great. And, that's where we're at as a family. But, he's really on top of it, and he really educates himself, and he's a really good brother. But I also want him to completely have his own life.
Right. One of my favorite things that he has said when we've interviewed him is that he was really glad that early on you told him. Like, you didn't hide anything. And he, and he basically said, like, I started to notice that Dylan was different, and I wanted to immediately know why. And I wanted to know, like, what to do and what was going on. And he wanted to be included from an early age in all the therapies.
Yep, for sure.
And I've worked with families that haven't wanted to do that. And every family gets to make their own decision, right? Like, what is good for one family might not be good for another family, and honoring that. But I do, I have a stepdaughter on the spectrum. Her sister also wanted to be very involved early on. And you and I interviewed a bunch of siblings, and they all wanted to be involved. Yeah. And almost all of them either volunteered or do some kind of work in the field of autism.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Right? Like, they're the movers and shakers.
Yep, for sure.
And then the last thing I'll just share for people listening to our podcast is we talk a lot about safety as well. And if you aren't familiar with the September 26th project, it is a website that you can go to. It is a website in honor of a mom, Fate Almighty, and her son, Moo, who on September 26th, 2.5 years ago, did perish in a house fire. And her son was pretty severely impacted, and they did not have working fire alarms and some fire extinguisher problems, and they didn't have a prepared exit strategy to get out of the home. You can watch the video of her sister, who is a huge advocate and goes around the country talking about the importance of fire safety and planning for our kids on the spectrum, and all emergency and disaster planning. There are tips on there. Jen, you early on worked out strategies for Dylan to get out of the house and practice and plan. And I often share the strategies you put together for Dylan when I present on that topic. And we do have a couple podcasts about that topic, including the surviving sisters, as well as our good friend, Jonathan, who works for the fire department.
Yes. Yeah, it's so important. I mean, safety, even to this day, even just walking in parking lots or walking, on city streets and stuff like that, I'm still on edge, and it's still always a teaching moment. But yeah, definitely anything, just the house safety, there's so many components that can happen. But we both knew them, and it was so tragic when that happened. And it was a big eye opener for me just to, really be on top of it and, make sure, again, whatever I can do to, make our household safe for Dylan and for everybody.
Yeah, and one thing I learned from that is a lot of our kids are being excluded from fire drills in their public schools. I didn't realize that till I started doing some presentations and talking about the topic, and that's illegal. Schools can't do that. And so if you're listening to that, same with sexual education, they can't exclude kids on the spectrum from those topics, and they're supposed to be included.
That's where we have to advocate.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our podcast and our podcastathon, our first one ever. And please subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can find us on Facebook, 25-year look across the autism spectrum. Jen and I talking about our journey together. I'm going to bed.
I might be. We'll see.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.